Okay, so the first thing that I am going to show you here is that back stitch. So the back stitch is kind of like your catch-all stitch. It's probably the one you'll use the most. It's basically a way of creating a straight or curved line with minimal seaming. So that means like there's little, not seaming I guess, but little minimal gapping so that you don't have like fabric showing between your lines when you're trying to make a straight line. Because one of the problems, and I'll show you right now, with embroidery is that sometimes you want to make a line, you want to make this long line, right? Seems easy enough. You can just poke the thread in, poke the thread out, right? Looks easy. But then as soon as you kind of get this off the hook, it's just going to be hanging out like that. And you don't want that. So what you do instead, I'm going to pull this out. And as you can see, I've kind of already set up everything up. I assume you know how to do the tension hoop and putting a little knot at the end of your thread and threading your needle, so I didn't want to make a video for that. But if you would like me to, I am more than happy to do so. I'm just rethreading my needle right now. Another thing is your fabric. I don't know what kind of fabric you're using. Typically for embroidery, you want to use a fabric that is not elastic in any way. So you don't want to use like stretch cotton or anything like that, or jersey or whatever, if you can avoid it. If you're doing a specific project, obviously, that requires that, there are ways around it. But like this is a non-stretch cotton, I believe, so it doesn't, no elasticity in it. But anyway, for the back stitch, it's really easy. So you'll just see me, I've got the knot in my thread, I'm pulling in through the back. See, just poking in through the back. I like to use my finger as a kind of guiding line. You'll see my finger moving underneath here, and I'm just taking my fingernail right to the edge of where I want it, and I'm kind of lining my needle up against my fingernail without obviously puncturing my skin. I'm coming up, pulling all the way out, right? It's caught on my knot right there now. Basically, and this is what I like to do, is I like to have a little guider line, and I'll do this for pretty much all of my stitches. You'll see I've got my little guider line. Let's say this is about as big as you want a single stitch to be. So in this case, you don't want to go much larger than that, much longer than that. So I'm just finding the place on my line. I'm sticking the needle through, and I'm going down, 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 down. Boom. That's my starter stitch right there. Okay, perfect, pretty, beautiful. So then what's going to happen, instead of coming up right here where you might think, right where this stitch ends, instead what you're going to be doing is I'm going to be taking my best estimate of this length of thread, however long this is. That's going to be how I judge how far back I'm going to go. And instead of feeling for right here, I'm actually going to be feeling for about the same distance away from that as that original thread is, if that makes sense. So instead of poking up, I'm going to poke way ahead. I'm going to pull up, right? Okay, I'm stuck there again. I pulled my thread all the way through, and I'm going to poke it right down here. It's going to go right in the same hole as that initial, where that initial starter stitch ended. Right? And then, yeah, you just continue that process. You don't want to pull too tight, especially when you're doing your first couple threads. The fabric has a tendency to bunch like that. You see that? If you like keep pulling it, you don't want that. So tight, but not so tight that your thread puckers or your fabric puckers, and then you just keep doing that. Right? I've got my little guy. I've got about the same distance as the last thread that I did. I'm pulling up. I'm making sure that this isn't too puckered right here. You can kind of wiggle your fabric around and it'll loosen it up a little bit. And I'm poking right into the same hole that that last stitch ended. And like that. And obviously it's not perfect. You know, you see a little bit where the thread is, where it's meeting. You'll see it like it'll create a little shadow. It'll be a little dark out there. But overall this creates the best like basic line stitch that you can get. And in fact, since I'm here, I won't even make a separate video for how to do a straight stitch, which I also noticed was on your list, because it's pretty much the same thing. just without the going back. So instead, with a straight stitch, this is like the most basic stitch that you could make. It's just like if you were doing like a basic sewing on yourself, if you've ever sewed anything. So let's just say that, you know, I've tied this off, and I'll show you how to tie this off at the end. Let's say I'm just poking up a new thread. I've knotted it, got everything going. I've felt where I want to start. I'm going to start somewhere around where this little white mark is. I'm feeling underneath, tracing with my fingernail. You can see it sticking out. That's where I want it to be. Bringing it up, 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 all the way. Got it tight like that now. And I'll do the same thing that I did with the back stitch. I'll just have a little starter stitch. This is about the length that I want all my stitches to be. So I'm going to put it right there. But instead, you're going to do the same thing where you're going to measure just about the same distance apart as the last one. However far, you know, however long this stitch is, that's where you want to pull your needle up again, if that makes sense. So I'm saying this is about the same distance away. Right there. And I'm bringing it up. But instead of going back, I'm just going to make another stitch. Right there. It's about the same distance, same length as that original stitch. And I'm just going to put it right there. This I also call like the bumblebee stitch, because it reminds me of when you're doing, like you're drawing a bumblebee as a kid and you've got those little like flight lines. That's pretty much what this looks like. Up, down, right? Now, of course, you can get these as close as you want to each other. Typically, the convention is however long the length of the original stitch is, you want the little gap to be the same length, and then you want the next stitch to be the same length as that. Obviously, this stitch came out a little bit longer than either of those. You can also get as close as you want. And this one comes a little bit closer if you just got a little straight stitch right there. A little bit less gapping. The only thing that you don't want to do is in the effort to get really, really close, you might accidentally just pop it right through the same hole as you did the original time. And sometimes you notice and sometimes you don't. But if you get too close, what's going to happen is you're going to pop your stitch right out. You don't want that. But okay, let's say I've finished this. I'm done with it. The easiest way to tie off your fabric, and the way that I suggest for most beginners, is to do this. Take a little cut right here. Give yourself a good little length. Now, embroidery thread comes in 6 strands. So obviously if I pull this apart, you'll see all these little guys. For beginners, I usually say you want to do 6 4 strands, just because they're easier to see, they're easier to manage, and when you tie it off, it makes it super easy, because if you just separate these two things, kind of unwind them from each other as far as you can, doesn't have to be perfect, right? You've got 2 little guys. You can just tuck them and do it like that, a little double knot like that. The other way, obviously, if this was still 6 strand, you could try and do it like this, but the thing is, it never really gets very close, and when it doesn't get flush with the back of the fabric, it's going to start pulling up if it's getting any kind of wear. So this is how I usually suggest how to do it. There are other ways in which you can secure, but this will give you the smallest knot, and you can do this with any combination of 2 or more threads, so it's pretty reliable. And then you can just cut as close as you can on top of that knot, and you're good to go.